So that's almost scary to me. It's like
Yes.
we're almost exclusively now communicating and meeting our romantic partner through an avenue that is brand new.
Yeah.
And it isn't really going well.
Who can I meet that can be the head of my household and I'm going to respect this guy? I'm not just going to choose a guy and say, okay, dear, for everything that he says. What if he's an idiot?
Right.
So don't choose an idiot. We don't have a lot of dating in the Bible, but we have enough information about what a good marriage looks like to look for one in our dating scene. It's so much easier to hit the target when you actually have a target.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Gen 180 podcast, a place where we go deeper talking about our faith. I'm Josh.
And I'm Anna.
And today we're talking about dating. We're opening that whole can of worms. We're going to get everyone mad at us. But how are we going to get started talking about this?
Well, we're Christians, so we're talking about a Christian perspective on dating, but dating is difficult for everybody. Like if you're young, if you're single, if you are in a relationship, if you're in a situationship, if you're trying to navigate the world, trying to find the right person, who is your person, you might face so many challenges, and we're trying to figure those challenges out. You know, if you how you find the right person. If you're in the church, how do you find someone who believes in the same things that you believe and they have the same values as you, and how to navigate loneliness when you don't have anybody and you're trying, to find someone, and how the culture today basically is against us finding the person the right way, and how the world has changed throughout the years. So we're going to talk about these challenges and offer some solutions for them.
I like how you said, like, a situationship. Yeah. That's a good reminder point to say, if you're not married, you're essentially single.
Yeah.
Meaning you owe nothing to someone unless
Right.
you say I do in front of God and everyone. Before that, that's the opportunity you
Yes.
have to be like, oh, you're toxic, or this isn't a good time for me to be dating, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
And then moving on, because it's just going to waste their time, your time. It's not good for anyone.
Exactly.
So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I'm mostly preaching at myself because I spent too much time in long-term relationships that really weren't going anywhere.
Tell us about it.
How do I, are we going to get into this? I'll get into this. Okay.
Just tell me
It's
the
just
mistakes.
embarrassing.
just the bad parts.
I had a great marriage modeled to me growing up. So I knew more or less what I was looking for.
Yes.
I didn't know how to get there. And I really had no dating modeled to me. And that was during the time, being born in the 90s, going through the early 2000s. That was the whole deconstruction movement along dating, where it was the who was it, saying I kiss dating goodbye, and various things saying you don't date, you court. And there was a lot of people saying, oh, well, that was toxic, so now we're just doing another thing. But I feel like the church has struggled over the past couple decades to, how is a Christian way of dating, and
Right.
and how are we supposed to be dating, and what does that look like, and what are the boundaries? I didn't know.
Yeah, we don't talk about it enough.
We don't. The church doesn't talk about it. I mean, we
Yeah.
can count on one hand in the past 5 years
Yes.
the number of times we've ever heard it mentioned. But this is
Yes.
a really important thing. So anyway, so I struggled with it, and I felt like I knew what I wanted, didn't know how to get there, and I was trying to take a relationship that I chose with the wrong motives or the wrong values, and then tried to force fit it into something that was like a Christian shaped mold or
see.
something like that. As opposed to going back to first principles and being like, okay, what is a godly woman? What are the most important things to me? What are the deal breakers? What are the red flags that I'm not going to tolerate? And then what am I bringing to the relationship?
Right.
And being intellectually honest with myself on what I could bring to something like that, and what person would I end up attracting in
Right.
reality?
Right.
And then finding that counterpart in the wild, if you will, very much in the wild.
Yeah. So you took your relationships way too seriously. You
I
wanted
think so.
to make them work.
I think a little bit too much.
I mean, it's a hard thing to complain about. It's like, oh, he's just so committed. You don't hear that about
to
anybody.
a fault, where I would ignore things or
Yeah.
whatever, but.
My baby.
But what about you? What about you? What was?
Well, I was.
If I'm gonna spill my guts, you have to now.
I was the exact opposite. We literally, like, if this was a movie about our lives, it would be the beginning, and they would show your house and your mom and dad, like this perfect couple and 5 children, and everybody's like, dressed up, all, to go to school together, and you look so clean. In my house, it was like the jungle. I was like one of the Amazonian women because we had no man in my house. If my mom is a single mother, my grandmother was a single mother, my aunt are all single mothers, and when I was a kid, my family were we were not Christians. And when we became Christians, the guys in my house, the sons, they marry the girlfriends that they were dating, they had kids with, they married the baby mamas, and because it was the right thing to do. And they're married to this day. They're all 30 plus years marriage on the men.
All right.
But the women, they were left, by the guys. So I grew up on a house full of women and with no men. And I believe that every guy left, like the men were not worth it, because the men in my life were legit.
That was the pattern you saw.
No, it was not.
Very logical conclusion.
Something that I read about. It was my life. The woman had to do everything. So I didn't want to put myself through the same things that my mom went through. Even now that I'm pregnant, sometimes I'll start crying just thinking about, it's like, man, this is so hard. I am so blessed to have you. Like, you're such a good husband to me, and you're already such a good dad to our son. And I think, like, how did my mom do this? She had to do it alone. But I was so convinced, like, I'm not going to go through this. So I was very strict with the things that were important to me. And I just convinced myself that I was not going to find the person, that I was just going to be single my whole life. And, it was... even when I got lonely and I really wanted someone, it was hard for me to find someone at the church that met what I wanted. And what I wanted was, like, someone that looked like what the Bible said a guy should look like, and someone who had ambition and initiative, because the woman in my house did everything. So I wanted a guy who would come up and be a guy and actually lead and do things, And guys in the church can be very passive, because, it's like, I'm just praying about it, God. Just like, but what are you doing?
Overly spiritual.
Exactly.
Like, if God tells me that I need to do it.
I remember this one guy who could not come talk to me, and he asked his mother to ask me for my number, but he made her pretend that I was getting invited to sing at a because I was part of the worship team. That is what I did. I sing at a church, that they were going to do this event and they invited me to sing, but she just wanted my number to give to her son.
That's elaborate.
And then he texted me late at night saying that God told someone in the church that I was the woman for him. And I was just like, really? Like, that kind of thing really annoyed me, because like, if God actually told you something, then you get a hold of that and you go look for that woman. It's like, if that's the woman for you, why are you not talking to her? So those things really annoyed me.
I'm not a woman, but if I were, I would want a man to come and talk to me and not talk to his mother and talk to me. That is the biggest red flag I think I've heard in this conversation.
I remember I told my uncle, because my uncle is my pastor, and I told him about it. She's like, this guy's texting me and his mom asked me for my number. She tricked me. And he was like, well, you have to understand that a lot of these guys are just afraid of talking to us. Like, I get it, but there are things that you do and there are things that you don't do. Now I'm not going to look at them with respect. So my problem was just, like, I was too afraid of putting myself in bad situations. So I avoided relationships for a long time until I found the right person. And I thought I found the right person before I found you. And then that relationship was very wrong. And I was just, no. But I got out of it a lot quicker than you did yours.
Yeah, it takes me a while. I'm slow.
Just because I was so alert. I was in high alert all the time.
You had expertly tuned radar.
Yes.
Over years of examples in your life.
It was not good, but it got me, through the years without getting in trouble. And then we met each other, and I immediately saw, I was like, yeah, that's the guy. And, we fell in love, and we married very fast. We married within 11 months of actually dating.
Yeah, I mean, we had talked for years.
Yes.
And I think that's something to preface it with, is that since we were so long distance, we were on and off of talking.
Yeah.
But I guess when we started dating, it was pretty fast paced.
Yeah, because I was in Brazil. I had no intentions of coming to the U.S. I live here now because we married, but I was going to go back to my country.
Right.
And you had no intention of going to Brazil. Like, why would you do that?
Right.
So all the time that we were talking, I was literally across the continent, and there was no point in keep talking, and we didn't talk for years. And then when we finally came back together, it took us 11 months to get married.
You mentioned something earlier that I think is worth going into. You said you were looking for someone that is godly in the way that the Bible talks about a godly man. And I was curious, what does the Bible say about a godly man, and what are some things about that? Is it looking for someone that maybe has a relationship of some sort, that prays to God, that is in the church or serving, or... Well,
the Bible talks about how a man should lead their house, it even talks about leading in the church, saying that if you don't lead your house well, you shouldn't be a leader at the church because you don't even have the example of your own house. So like the ones that wanted to be deacons, that was the rule. Like, see how they lead their family. Because if you don't lead your family well, how can you lead the church well? And it talks about how the guy is the head of the family. So for me, in my mind, I'm just like, who can I meet that can be the head of my household, and I'm going to respect this guy? Because I'm not just going to choose a guy and say, okay, dear, for everything that he says. What if he's an idiot?
Right.
So don't choose an idiot.
Yeah, it's just another way of looking at it is you now have an opportunity in the dating world to avoid that.
If we talk about like what does the Bible says about a godly man or a godly woman, what does the Bible says about dating at all? And the thing is about the Bible doesn't talk about dating.
Yeah, I was thinking like it's very, very little. It's just Abraham went into Sarah's tent and that was pretty much it, right?
There's not like you see some couples meeting in the Bible. Usually they just say this person married this person, they had kids. But you see a couple of stories of couples meetings. One of them is Isaac and Rebecca.
Yes.
And the way that they meet is not even like they meet. They like Isaac's dad. It was just like, just go look for a wife for my son. And then the guy goes and he sees like a bunch of women live there, and he prays to God like, the woman that I ask for water and she gives me water, and then she also offers water to my animal. That's the woman that I'm gonna take for this guy.
Isn't that interesting?
So this servant just came to Rebecca and is like, oh, can you give me a little water? And she says, sure. Do you want me to give water to your animals too? He was looking for someone who was kind. He was looking for someone that saw the needs of others, that was not even asked for it. Like that was the prayer. It was about something practical. And that's my thing against people that say like, oh, I'm just praying about it. But you're not practical. Like what this guy was looking for was practical things. Like, what is the woman who is going to be kind enough not to say yes to my request, but also satisfy my need that I didn't even ask her for, to give water for my animals. And then, he goes to her family's house and he says like, I want to take her to marry this dude. And then she goes like, okay, I'll go. And then she goes and she marries Isaac. The Bible says that he looks at her, she looks at him, and they like each other. And Isaac had just lost his mom, and she was there to comfort him. He loved her so much that he made him feel better after he was grieving his mother's loss. It's a beautiful story. But they never even dated. Like, he just sent his servant out and he found a woman. So the Bible doesn't really talk about dating. The Bible talks about marriages. And he starts very early on in Genesis chapter 2, 2:24, that says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh, which is talking about, Adam and Eve, and they didn't even have parents. But, Moses is writing about you leaving your parents to marry your wife. Which
before the first one happened.
Exactly, which just means that he's stepping out of the story and tells you like, no, this story is the standard. This is what you should do. Look at this couple. The guy needs help. God sends help through a woman. They leave their families and they become a new family. Like that's basically what he's doing. And then you have Proverbs 31, which a lot of guys in the church like to memorize.
Oh yeah, is that the virtuous woman one?
Yes.
It talks about all the bullet points on like, this is what a godly woman is.
Exactly. And in the verse 10 it says, a wife of noble character who can find, she's worth far more than rubies. Meaning that like you have to find a woman, and it's very difficult to find a good one. So you should list of things that you should look for. And then in Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So the Bible will talk about, and that's just a few verses, but we have so many verses talking about what a godly man and what a godly woman is and what a godly relationship and marriage is. So you look like there's no dating, but there's marriage, which makes you think that the purpose of dating is marriage. So we don't have a lot of dating in the Bible, but we have enough information about what a good marriage looks like to look for one in our dating scene. So if you want, like, the Bible talks about the woman respecting a guy, you have to respect your husband. What kind of husband would you respect? And then you look for that, that's how you should look for a partner. And that having that mentality that the Bible gives you the footprint, to a good marriage, it helps you save yourself from so many problems and so much headache, because you think things like, how early should you date? Maybe you're 15 and you want to start dating someone, but when are you going to marry? Are you going to marry when you're 20, when you're 25, after college, before college? Where are you going to go to college? Like, are you going to date someone who is in your town and they want to go to a different state? And are you going to change your whole life and go to them with that state?
Right.
Maybe it's not the best idea to start dating too soon, because you want to date to get married. Or maybe you want to date a guy who's really cute or a girl who's really cute, but you don't see yourself spending your rest of your life with them, because they do these things that drive you crazy and you can't get over them, and you're just with them because they're really cute or they're hot. And when you're young, you're really stupid and you just want to be with people because they're hot. And then you're going to grow older and those things are going to become less and less and less important. So maybe, again, don't date someone that you can't imagine you spending every day of your life with that person. Because like you and I, we're in the same house all the time.
All the time. Yeah, and we were very good friends before we even got engaged or before we even dated.
Right.
And so even in the first few conversations, I was like, I could really be in this conversation for the rest of my life, And so if you ever have that moment, and I really believe it's a God thing, eventually, when at some point when you're in a relationship with someone where you're like, that's the one.
Yeah.
And I really believe that. And then you embody that, and then you pursue that with that intention of this is the person I want to marry.
Right.
But before that, you don't know. If you see someone across from you in your classroom or a colleague or a friend of a friend, you don't know anything about them.
Right.
But you eventually will get to that point, hopefully.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of it is on the individual for information gathering. Is that weird to say? I feel like I'm such an engineer. It's painful. But I feel like in the beginning, it should be information gathering.
Yeah.
You don't know enough.
Yes.
You know you're attracted to them, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then you want to get to the point where you know enough to make the decision, oh yeah, we're not for each other. Or we not just attractive, but I would love to spend the rest of my life with you.
Yes.
And the difference between getting there is the information you have.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be the most practical thing for men to do, as well as women, is just to try as quickly as possible and as naturally as possible to get to that point where you have enough information.
Don't be a creep.
No.
Don't stalk.
Tell me a list of your fears and your schedule for the week. It's like, what? Yeah, just as naturally as possible to get to that point so that you can make the decision, yay or nay. Not even like you're getting married tomorrow. Just like, are we going to waste each other's time with this?
Yeah, like hang out with the same group of people so you see how he talks to others and how she behaves when she's in a group and with her friends, how they treat servants at restaurants, how they treat their parents. You know
what's interesting? And it's such a tangent, but I think it matters, is that most of us now are dating online. I think it's like 60-some% of singles right now are on the online dating apps. 75% rate their dating scene as being very poor. The question is why? It just goes into that one chart where you look at the way people met.
Yeah.
Have I showed that to you? Let me show you the chart.
All right.
Could you pull that up, Steve? Yeah, here it is. So this is over the past 60 years. This is how people have met in the U.S. And so you have the primary way that people met for a long time. This goes back even further than this chart will show. Is mostly through friends. So you typically dated someone based on who your friend or a friend of a friend introduced you to.
Yes.
And a lot of the times it was also family. Like, oh, we know this family and blah, blah, blah. They have a daughter or a son. And then that happens. A lot of it was work, with the people getting out of towns and getting more industrialized and clumping into cities. And then you start to get involved in the workplace a lot more.
You see them every day.
You see them every day. And so it makes a lot of sense. At school, too, as well as a big avenue.
Right.
But over the past 20 years, just 20 years, over the whole human history, then 20 years, immediately out of nowhere, this new line jumps up, which is people meeting online. And so that's almost scary to me. It's like we're almost exclusively now communicating and meeting our romantic partner through an avenue that is brand new.
Yeah.
And it isn't really going well.
Well, we're talking about some challenges that we face in dating world. That's challenge number one is online dating. Like, how do you navigate that? Because the online dating world was not made to make us happy.
No. And the way that you filter people also, it's like we're not dealing with people as much as we're almost swiping through a catalog of wants and desires, and things that might have been nice to haves are now things that you just set your hard filter on of only looking at a certain people on a certain height or a certain weight or whatever.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that website, igotstandardsbro.com?
No.
I got to show you this. It's called IGotStandardsBro.com. I'll put it down in the descriptions if you're interested. But you can put in your filters, very, very easy filters on what you're looking for in a romantic partner. And you can look up age, the age you're willing to date, and you put a range in there, like 28 to 30 or something. And then the height, the weight, and then the salary.
Yeah.
And you could say, I want someone that makes six figures, which is a very common thing you hear people, I want 6 foot, six pack of abs and 6 figures type of thing.
Yeah.
If you put that in, it's less than 0.3% of men. So you realize how rare what you're looking for actually is.
Yeah.
And then if that's really that rare, where it's like 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000 men exist the way that you want, or women, you got to ask yourself, am I offering the kinds of things in the marketplace of relationships where I would attract someone like that?
Right. I mean, honestly, just a tangent to that. I have met guys that fit that profile, and they were idiots. And that's when you realize that when you actually get to talk to people, sometimes they look perfect on paper. You talk to them like there's no chemistry. There's nothing between their eyes. Like, not a thought. It's like a Labrador.
It's just a pretty face, I guess.
Exactly. And I'm not saying like, pretty people are stupid. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that
it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be.
Exactly. And if that's all you can filter online and that's all you're looking for online, you don't get to see all the wonderful people that don't have those things. And they might like blow your mind and make you fall in love with them, but you're not navigating it right because it was not meant to make you navigate it right.
Right. It makes sense to me intuitively why we're moving online. I mean, now we have that option, so it's an attractive option. It takes 0 effort to set up a profile, very little risk. But it also makes sense because men aren't approaching women as much as they used to. It's like 55% of single men between 18 and 30 aren't approaching a woman in the past year.
Wow.
So it's most men are not approaching women at all anymore.
It's a long time.
77% of single women in the same age group say that they want to be approached more, that they're not really getting approached in person. 86% of women say they expect men to make the first move. So even though we have a more modern way of looking at things like, oh, women can do everything men can do, which I'm like, really? Men cannot do everything a woman can do. Even with all of that happening, still most women, the vast majority, want to be approached and they want a man to make the first move. 50% of men say they don't want to make the first move because they're worried they're going to come off as creepy or predatory.
They're afraid.
17% of women say that a man asking a woman out to drinks constitutes sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So that's the minority of women that men are worried that they're going to encounter when they go and they ask that person across the street or at the Starbucks, hey, do you want to go get a drink or whatever? You're worried you're going to run into that 18% Karen who's like, it's sexual harassment. So anyway, women and men seem to have completely different experiences when it comes to the dating world. 82% of women report experiencing creepy behavior, sometimes, often, or constantly. It's not something with men. Men do not experience creepy stuff from women.
Guys are more creepy.
Super creepy. And it's probably a small percentage of men ruining it for everyone else. But it's still true that 82% of women are experiencing this. And so they have different dilemmas right now. I feel like the women's dilemma, and tell me if you agree or disagree, is that they fear for their safety and they don't want to get a creepy dude, but they also expect the man to make the first move. So that's a hard dilemma.
It's a balance.
It's a balance. And the men's dilemma is they don't want to come off as creepy, and they understand they have to make the first move, but they're too afraid to.
Yeah. Well, because before you were just afraid of rejection, but now you are afraid of a lawsuit.
Getting canceled. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be so much bigger, and it can be such a bigger humiliation, basically, to come out to someone and talk to them and that being that kind of person that you talk to. So I understand.
I'm so glad I'm not dating right now. I hated dating, and in person, I'm extroverted around my friends. I can be extroverted with topics that I'm very interested in. But when it comes to a woman I have never met, for me to go over, I'm just stumbling over my words. I'm like, you know what, that sucked. Let me not ever do that ever again. I can understand it. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of online profiles too. Eventually, I looked at it like an engineer. I'm like, okay, I didn't want to do this because I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. I knew that the stigma was there, where if you met someone online, you were like a weirdo or something if you're doing online dating, which is totally not the case now. But that's sort of something I still had. And I was like, okay, I've been trying to put this off as long as I can, but let me just do it. And so I did it like an engineer, and I'm like, okay, I take my profile and I put it on like 5 or 10 different dating apps. And then hopefully I can spread out my exposure and get as many dates lined up as possible,
Yeah.
because the more dates I have, the more likely I'll be able to meet the person that I want to marry.
Yes.
But it didn't work like that at all. Surprise, surprise.
You did meet a lot of people. It just never went anywhere.
Yeah, I didn't meet anyone that I felt like had similar values.
Yes.
And people that I felt like I could pursue in that way.
Yeah, so if we were talking to people right now and giving them advice, if you are on that world and you want to do things right, like if you want people to have the same values as you, the first thing that I would say, and tell me if you agree, if you have anything else to say, but I would say that it's going to be a lot harder to do that online just because of how the system is designed. You can put whatever you want on your profile. You can say I'm a Christian and you never actually go to church. And then you meet a Christian that goes to church 3 times a week, and you won't be the same person. You won't be similar at all. Some people are just culturally Christians, and you might be a Christian.
Or you might have someone, like you said, goes to church 3 times a week, but they never mentioned it on their profile.
Exactly.
So you just won't know.
Exactly. And then you go on dates and you get disappointed and you think like, oh, all men are trash, or all women are garbage. Like, I can't find a real godly woman. Well, it might be really hard to do that online. It's not impossible, but don't think that that's a reflection of the real world. What I would advise is that, yeah, try to do that online, go on dates, put yourself out there, but, also serve your local church. Go where the people that you're looking for are actually, because that makes it so much more likely that you can watch those people. You can create that buffer again. You can watch them serve. You can see it. For me, the way that I used to describe it is like if you're walking a certain path and then you look next to you and there's a person walking the same path, and then you talk to each other because you're on the same path. But online, you can't really see that super well unless they have a very, very open life, open profile. They overshare.
Kind of like me. My whole life was out there, and you were able to find me from Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, I saw all your siblings before I met any of them.
But I was also very public about my faith.
Exactly.
And I knew that would alienate some people, and some people like, oh, that guy's weird or whatever. And I was okay with that because I knew it was more likely if I throw out the bat signal that someone that I wanted to attract would be able to be attracted.
Which worked for me, and what I did the same thing, and it worked for you. We were trying to show our faith online, but you really don't know what you're actually gonna get until you meet them in person.
Right.
So yeah, do like what we did, schedule a bunch of calls, and like Josh, on our first call, you were like interviewing me for a job.
I'm so sorry. She got the job.
To be fair, I did get the job, but I remember I laughed on the phone because the questions that you were asking me were so serious, and it didn't bother me. It just entertained me because I never met someone that would do that. You were the first person. You were like, so what are your politics? And
I wanted to know if you were gonna hate me or love me.
But it was for me, I had my own set of questions. They were so different.
Very
than yours,
different questions.
but we were trying to figure each other out. So my advice for you, like if you're trying to date online, is that make yourself the most honest person online. Like if you're a Christian, like a true believer, make yourself look like a true believer so you don't attract the people that are just pretending or just sympathizers.
I really can't stress that point enough, is that if you're authentically yourself, which is really difficult to do, if you're authentically yourself, there is a lid for every single pot. Everyone is someone's exact type.
Yes.
And you want to find that person because
Yeah.
you're going to feel so fulfilled. Like we found each other in our weirdness.
Yes.
But we never could have done that if I was trying too hard
Yes.
to be something that I'm not.
Yeah.
There's this book that I have to plug. Norman Wright, 101 Questions to Ask Before You Get Engaged. This is gold. This is worth its weight in gold. It's a lot of good questions on there. They're not questions you ask on a first date. Don't do what I did, even though it worked for me. I feel like it's something you ask after you get to know the person and you're both liking each other and you're maybe seeing something in the future and you talked about it and maybe you're both serious. But there's a lot of good questions in here that are really deep, like 5 adjectives to describe your relationship with your parents or things like that.
Yes.
Or have you ever experienced any loss in your life that you haven't fully grieved over?
Yes.
Or what's your opinion on making a budget in the house? And
Yeah.
like, what are your opinions on drugs and alcohol and things like that?
Practical things.
These are really practical.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind. This is a little tangent. I wasn't expecting to go on, but it blows my mind that people can be married for years and they've never talked about kids. They've
Yes.
never talked about, like, do you want to have kids?
Yeah.
And then one of them does and one of them doesn't. And then
Yeah.
it creates a rift. And I was like, how have you not talked about this? You should know a lot more about the other person. But it's just not important to some people to bring up. They just it didn't come up naturally.
Well, and it goes back to our first point, which is if you approach dating, as something intentional, like I want to find a partner to get married, then those questions, they come up so much earlier than later in life, and it can save you so much trouble because you can throw a bunch of darts on a board and you might hit the target. Like there are people that never talk about any of these things and they end up getting married because you start seeing each other. It's like, oh, you're just seeing each other, it's cool, and then you go like, oh, I really like them, we're more serious now, and then it's like, oh, I really love them and I like spending time with them. Oh, let's just get married, we just spend all the time together anyway, let's just live together and get married. And then you get married, but you've never intentionally prepared to get married, so you don't know if the other person wants kids, you don't know if the other person likes dogs or cats, you don't know how they're good with their money, you don't know how much money they have saved, or if they like saving money, or if they want the same bank account or separate bank accounts.
Those tiny little things really add up.
They
And I
do.
feel like if you're off by a few degrees in the
Yeah.
beginning and then you walk 20 years down the road of marriage, you could have a cavern between you.
Yes.
Eventually.
Exactly.
But I feel like the word that you said was intentional.
Yeah.
I was not being as intentional in the beginning. I was
Mm-hmm.
looking for someone I was attracted to and someone that maybe went to church, and that
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah.
And eventually I would get into these cavern situations where a couple years down the road, I'm like, oh my gosh, like how did we get here to this point? If I was more intentional in the beginning, being honest with like what I was looking for and maybe sharing more about, these types of questions that are
Right.
in the book,
Right.
like we could have saved a lot of time.
Yes.
Their time, my time. It wasn't helping anyone. We
Mm-hmm.
were just wasting time.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it comes down to, because there's an idea today, I think, out there that anything goes, do whatever feels good, be casual, whatever, and I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but I'm saying it's incompatible with a good strategy for marriage. When it comes to marriage, I'm not gonna be casual because you'll end up with something that's incompatible with
Yeah.
something like marriage.
Yes.
Which is anything but casual.
Right.
You wouldn't want your husband one day to say, well, I'm just going to casually be over here with this other woman. You're like, no, we made a decision. It's like, well, hey, we've been casual this whole time. But anyway, that's how I feel, is that you have to be intentional or else you're not going to end up in the place that you wanted to be in the first place. But
Exactly.
I'm not saying be overly intense, though. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like you're drilling questions down on day one. Like you could still have a good time. Be relaxed. Have fun.
You're asking like how many kids you're gonna have on your first date. Like you don't need to do that. Maybe ask that, on the fifth date.
Once you're going steady with someone.
Yeah. So, you don't have to be a creep. You don't have to come up too strongly, but be intentional in what you're doing around that person. Watch them, see how they move, see what they say, how they behave. And that makes your chances of actually hitting the target a lot, higher because you have a target.
Right.
It's so much easier to hit the target when you actually have a target. We don't have a ton of time to talk about all the things that we can talk about dating. Like we can mention, some other challenges, like, how do you keep pure when you're dating? Like, because it's not popular to say like, I'm saving myself for marriage. Which, if you're in the church, even in the church, like not everybody's doing that. People
Most aren't.
Exactly. So how do you behave on that? And all I want to say about this is like we chose to not sleep with each other when we were dating, and it was a choice that we made separately, and something that we said to each other in the very beginning. I told you, like, I don't sleep with my boyfriends.
Yeah, but we didn't even need to talk about it because we both wanted that already.
Exactly. So when we actually started dating, that was already established that we were not going to do that. But a lot of people just think like, but what am I going to know that if I'm compatible with them? It's just like, first of all,
It's gonna fit. You don't have to worry.
if you are compatible about everything else, you don't have to worry about sex. And
would you really want someone that you're, sexually compatible with, but then not compatible in any other way?
exactly, which can happen when you have sex way too soon, because then it skews your vision about that person's worthiness in your life. It's like, oh, the sex life is good. Everything else is garbage. But you like that part, so it makes you stay because, you have good chemistry together. Chemistry is not enough. You know, in fact, when you make good decisions, it makes you sexier to me. So, and that has nothing to do with, mostly if you're a woman, for us it's not purely physical. For us it's what you do throughout the day. That is the foreplay. Like if you wash the dishes, that is a lot more impressive, as if you did, like, you know, have the six pack. Like, I'm not even looking at your abs, but I am looking at what your hands are doing, what your mouth is saying, where your eyes are looking, you know, how you're treating me, how you're treating others. So really, that is not even a point. Also, statistics show that the people that have the most amount of sex are married people. And the best kind of sex is married people. So there's a lot of out there, like, you have to experiment and try yourself. Like, it doesn't go that well. It's just like what people like to believe. Nobody's really having fun with casual sex unless it's a narcissistic person that wants to use other people just for their pleasures.
The stats are pretty clear that young people are having less sex than ever before,
which is crazy.
Married people are having just as much as they've had before.
Yeah.
So it seems like the people that are married are the ones that are actually smashing more.
So it's really not true. Like, we have an over-sexualized society where, like, porn is everywhere, but people are having really not a lot of sex, but they talk a lot about it. And the idea of you keeping yourself pure and getting to know the other person before you go that path, it's not popular because it sounds like you're missing out. You're not missing out. Statistically, you're not missing out. And the other idea is, like, you know, you want to live with the person before, you know, you get married, which, again, statistically, people that live together before they get married are more likely to get divorced.
More likely. Significantly more likely.
Significantly.
I don't know why that is, but it is.
So it's the idea of, like, doing a test drive with a person. That is not something that you should do with humans. It's something that you do with cars.
The test drive is when you're dating.
Exactly.
You know, you don't need to be, you know, waking up in the morning brushing teeth together to figure out if you're compatible.
And really, when you get married and you start getting to know each other physically more, it's time. It's you getting to know the other person, what you like and what I like. And we figured those things out together with time. That's not something that you figure out in a night. That is not how it goes. Like, you don't know who that person is. You don't know what they like. Maybe they're into feet.
Or hands.
Jordan Peterson says that if you're not comfortable enough talking about something to the other person, you shouldn't do that thing to the other person. And if you are together, if you had like a whole year of dating, of really getting to know each other, and they become the most attractive, beautiful person to you, you're gonna like sleeping with them after you get married, because you're already looking forward to that. They are already beautiful to you. You just have to figure each other out. And that's the easiest thing when you already have that compatibility.
Figure each other out sexually, but after marriage. Figure each other out before marriage in a non-sexual way, so that you can really explore the what am I saying? I'm trying to put this into like a soundbite and I can't. Oh, someone's here.
We have to wrap up.
We have to wrap up. Thank you guys for listening. We'll have another podcast on this in the future with some friends.
Yes.
So look forward to that. And we have some people at our front door right now, so we gotta go.
We gotta go, but I hope you had
Comment,
a good time.
like, subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next video.
Bye.
Peace.